Deadly Premonition I don't even know how to begin. You play as an FBI agent who talks to himself and his cup of coffee while exploring an open world that occasionally has you fighting creepy, twitchy people with back problems. Oh, and there's a killer in a raincoat called Raincoat Killer. Developed by Access Games and directed by Hidetaka Suehiro, Deadly Premonition is one of those games that managed to acquire a cult following, despite being a very polarizing game back when it released in 2010. And after playing the whole game, I honestly think it's something real special, despite the rough edges. But before I go into it, I'll properly summarize the main story now. You play as Frances York Morgan, an FBI agent sent to a small town called Greenvale in order to investigate the murder of a young woman. Her death resembled a series of other murder cases that happened in America, so York goes on to inspect the residence with the assistance of Greenvale's sheriff, George Woodman, his assistant Thomas McLean, and the deputy sheriff Emily Wyatt. The characters were really one of the best things about the game. They were quirky, and the conversations that they have with each other would go from cheesy to hilarious. The music made those interactions even better too. Yes, it gets repetitive, but this game has a soundtrack that goes everywhere. Things might be serious in one moment, and then the background music will abruptly change to this tune that sounds like it came out of Animal Crossing. But it fit well with the story anyway because of how much it felt like a B-movie. I actually watched a few episodes of Twin Peaks before I played Deadly Premonition, because people online kept talking about how similar they were. And I could see a lot of similarities from the story, characters, and setting. One of the characters that I like in Twin Peaks is Dale Cooper, so it was no surprise that I ended up liking York too when I started playing the game.
This is a good biscuit.
So focusing on Deadly Premonition, I found York to be a very interesting and charming protagonist. He was just so weird, and it was funny how intrusive he was with everyone for the sake of the investigation. His conversations with Zach in the car were entertaining too, especially when he started talking about movies and his past cases. Emily didn't stand out to me at first, but she became more interesting once she got in the spotlight. Her chemistry with York was great too. I loved watching them slowly get to know each other. George, on the other hand, acts like a typical tough sheriff, but it was nice seeing him drop the act and open up from time to time. Thomas is adorable, that's all. The game plays out with Greenvale as the open world, so you'll spend most of the game exploring the map as you drive around and talk to the locals. I played the game knowing that it has a limited budget, but I was surprised at how much detail was placed in the people living in Greenvale. It felt a little like Shenmue. Everyone has their own schedule, so they'll do things like drive out to the supermarket or go to work. Their dialogue and daily routine even changes when the weather is rainy, so you'll have to be at the right time and the right place when you want to talk to someone. And speaking about time, you'll also have to go to a specific location within the time frame if you want to access a main story objective or side quests. There's no pressure though, because you can always smoke to pass time or go to sleep and try again the next day. There are also a few minigames scattered around the map, like fishing. Fishing here is really weird though, because it plays out like a roulette, with York catching a square thing that has a PNG image on it. But I like fishing in my game, so I give it a thumbs up. Oh, and you have to take care of York's energy and hunger here. It's necessary to eat and sleep sometimes if you don't want his health to start depleting. Good thing it's not as hardcore as something like a survival game, because Deadly Premonition is actually very forgiving. Time passes slowly when you're out and about in Greenvale. You can spend a lot of time doing a bunch of side quests and other stuff, without worrying about hunger or sleep levels. Like a lot of other items in the game, food can be picked up and bought from either the grocery store or vending machines available around Greenvale. Money isn't even an issue for York. Apart from his salary, he gets paid for literally doing anything in the game. Shaving? Here's some money. Smashing public property? Here's some more money. There was one thing that annoyed me when I was driving around in Greenvale, and it was the fuel mechanic. I get that it's part of the realism to refuel the car every now and then, but cars burned gas a little faster than I would have liked. There's only one gas station in town too, so you have to drive to the same spot in the map just to get a refill. Keeping a flare in your inventory is useful just in case you ever run out of gas. Driving was a little buggy sometimes, especially when the car would randomly bump into invisible things on the side of the road or do a full 360. Some parts of the game will switch you over to something called Otherworld. It's like an alternative world of your current location, similar to Silent Hill. You'll be solving simple puzzles and fighting enemies. A lot of these parts were pretty good at creeping me out, but I didn't like them as much as the rest of the game. The combat felt like a clunkier version of Resident Evil 4. There were also a few sections with quick time events. It was thrilling the first time it happened, but after a while it was just kinda awkward. But I guess enjoyable because of the awkwardness? I don't know. I know the game's graphics aren't that great and they look very outdated, especially when you compare it to other 2010 games that were released. It's because Deadly Premonition is a reboot of an older game called Rainy Woods. Originally planned for a PS2 and Xbox 360 release, the game was cancelled due to technical issues shortly after its TGS 2007 trailer was released. Many of its assets were reused when development on Deadly Premonition started, along with a very limited budget. I'm honestly glad that the protagonist was changed, because I find York's character design more recognizable. Honestly, the previous guy looks generic. This is actually the second time I played this game. The first time was a few years ago, but I never completed it because the game would have frame rate issues and crashes somewhere in the first 5 chapters. I'm really grateful for the 2020 Steam Guide for making the game work for me. It includes many of the fixes and enhancements needed to make the game more playable. Considering how my playthrough still crashed at times, I can't imagine playing the game with no fixes at all. The only advice I would have for those of you who wants to play on PC is to use the fixes and save using the payphones frequently. I know it's a pain, but I'm thankful that the game has a lot of those phones around because it personally saved me from losing tons of progress. I also read that the 2010 version of the game was slightly different, with the director's cut changing the original game in terms of visuals and controls, while providing additional cutscenes. Both of those versions on the PS3 and Xbox 360 had bugs and frame rate issues as well. A Switch port called Deadly Premonition Origins was released back in 2019, though sadly it doesn't include extra scenes from the director's cut. It's too bad because even though those scenes weren't long, they added to the game. So I'm sure it's really obvious that I like this game a lot despite everything. It's far from perfect, but its story and characters had so much charm that I found it hard to put down. I mean, it had to have a lot of charm for me if I was willing to try playing through the game again after all these years, and despite the crashes that I encountered when I finally did get to play it. It'll always be the type of game that'll turn some people away, but for the ones that do play it and end up liking it, it's going to be a really memorable experience. There's a prequel game that's coming out on the Nintendo Switch soon. Perfect timing too, because I got a Switch recently, so I might check it out after it releases. Let me know what you guys thought about the video. It'll be nice to cover some of Swery65's other games too, now that I'm done with his most popular title. I played a little bit of his other game, D4, around 4 years ago. I remember it being just as bizarre, so I might go back to that too. For now, I'm trying not to let Animal Crossing consume my life, but I think I'm failing. Anyway, maintain social distancing and wash your hands. I'll see you in the next video.